What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/NuclearRevenge, the subreddit for those who take their revenge to the most extreme of lengths. This post is by Melissa. Neighbor tried to get my mum fined over our shed, so I got his $40,000 pool filled in. I live with my mum. She's quiet, keeps to herself, never bothers anyone. A few months ago, our new neighbour decided to report her to the city for having an illegal shed in the backyard. It was total BS. The shed's been there for years and has full permits. The inspector came out, checked everything, and left without saying a word. But the neighbour, smug, proud, thought he'd scared us. So I did a little digging. Turns out his brand new pool was way too close to the property line and illegally built over a utility easement. I reported him, attached photos, quoted city codes. 2 weeks later, the city ordered him to either move it, impossible, or fill it in. He lost the whole thing, $40,000 down the drain. Literally. Now he gets to look at our completely legal shed every day, while standing over a pile of dirt where his pool used to be. Mum sleeps great now. The top comment reads, "You should get a small kiddie pool and put it in your backyard. Fill it and sit in it while staring at his house and drinking a margarita." So true. This next post is by Digital Girly. 1 and 20 years paying the bee back. Sometime back I was hired to a company by a CEO I had previously worked for someplace else. He was a good friend, so when his newest company wasn't achieving sales, he headhunted me to join the new one. The company hadn't made a sale in 2 years. Year 1, the software product was in beta, so it wasn't ready to be sold. Year 2, they realized using the tech staff to make high-end sales to C-level executives was the essiest sales model one could conceptualize. In general, and there are exceptions of course, these two personality styles don't speak the same language. Tech people talk tech, buyers talk benefits and how the potential product fills needs. I bridge the gap well by translating tech speak into natural conversational language, so buyers better understand how their needs will be filled. The job was an hour and a half drive one way from my home, so the CEO said I could work from home as long as I kept the sales management tool current. It's where you keep the notes of each prospect's status. Came to important meetings and made sure the executive team had daily sales reports. The first month I made the daily 3-hour commute because I needed to have solid, constant interaction with all of the departments to rapidly form my sales strategy and develop a two-way confidence level with the section heads. Once I had a handle on things, I was ready to launch my sales plan. In the meantime, the CEO hired a VP of sales, B-Boss, who started 4 days before I hit the ground running to get in front of buyers. She was a VP coming from the banking industry and had a long career in sales and marketing in finance products. I hated her from the moment she arrived. She knew F all about tech and I spent huge time trying to orient her, which wasn't ideal because I needed to work on my sales strategy. They brought her on board because she had strong experience gaining financial investors. Nevertheless, I forged ahead, travelled to a target state and spent 19 days crisscrossing it. When I came back, I had 17 contracts from buyers totaling about $2 million in sales. My CEO was overjoyed. Fast forward 6 months and now I'm working from home, I'm rocking and rolling, sales are strong, CEO is happy, good things are happening. B-Boss has landed an investor willing to drop $6 million into the company and they are coming into town for a discovery meeting. She asks me to drive up because they specifically want to meet the salesperson. Seconds before walking in the door for the big meeting, B-Boss pulls me aside and says she needs me to back her up on lies she has told them. Basically, she doubled my sales numbers. I told her there was no way I was going to do that. She says the CEO has okayed the lie. We get to the part in the talk where the investor is looking over my inflated sales numbers on the prospectus, then directly asks me how many sales I'm making a month. B-Boss is behind him waving her arms, but I was having none of it and answered truthfully. He looks askance, staring at the document which has the false number listed, while she's giving me the stink eye behind him. No one says a word. Dead silence. I asked to see the document, and fates have aligned, allowing me to solve the dilemma. I explained the first two numbers were transposed. They correlate well to my real sales versus inflated sales if you flip-flop the first two digits. Potential investor is satisfied and we move on. Switch gears. About a week later, I was meeting with the CIO in his office and he referred to my big T's. I'm no shrinking violet, but it stunned me because it was so unexpected. That night I was chatting with my BFF who happens to be a lawyer and told him about it in casual conversation. He said I should tell the CEO so he can address it. Thinking along smart business practices, I decided to tell B-Boss, to whom I directly report as proper protocol since we didn't have a HR department yet. Side note, I also reported directly to CIO as a boss since my role was a muddy mix of sales and tech. The next day, CEO calls me and I take him through it, telling him it's no big deal but to make sure he talked to CIO so it doesn't happen again. He says he'll do it right away. 2 days later I check in with him and CEO still hasn't talked to CIO because the investors were in town. I gently push him to get it done and casually mention my best friend, who happened to be a lawyer, was the one who urged me to tell him because any good CEO would want to know about it. I reiterate I'm not mad or upset. The only word he heard was lawyer. He went ape-ass that I was bringing a lawyer into the mix. Now this guy was my good friend. We worked together at 2 companies for years. I calmed him down, or so I thought, explaining that I only wanted him to talk to CIO. I also told him I hadn't brought a lawyer into it, that I had just been innocently chatting with my BFF who just happens to be a criminal defense attorney. He seemed okay and we hung up. The next day, I'm working as usual, and I get a call from an attorney who explains the company has hired her regarding my sexual harassment claim. I'm flummoxed and adamantly told her that was not the case, that I had no claim against the company. She said otherwise. And that's when everything changed dramatically. CEO was furious with me for bringing this on when investors were looking at us. His reaction set the tone, which filtered down. The company began to retaliate against me. B-Boss now made it a mission to make my life hell, forgetting to tell me about important meetings I was supposed to attend, freezing me out when I was in the office, telling me I could no longer even speak to CIO, a problem since I'm a multi-million-dollar tech product, needing his input, and I directly reported to him as my other boss, denying me a long-planned approved vacation. Basically anything she could devise to screw me over, she was gleefully working it. Coinciding with this was a serious health problem I developed, ultimately requiring surgery. My illness had no impact on my work as I was able to work from home, which made things easier on me health-wise. B-Boss then decided that I need to come into the office every day despite a 3-hour round-trip commute. Now I know you're thinking, why didn't I just leave, get another job somewhere else? I needed the health insurance. There was no way to turn around another job fast enough, and I had a complex surgery scheduled requiring 3 surgeons for my procedure. My doctor gave me a note for them which released me from having to make the daily commute so I would continue to work from home. As long as my work didn't suffer, they legally couldn't force me to commute, especially since working from home was a part of my employment contract from the outset. The night before my surgery, B-Boss calls to tell me they've cancelled my health insurance. After hanging up with B-Boss, I collapsed on the floor in a faint. I was so sick and mentally exhausted from all the stress. The next morning, the CEO frantically calls asking to talk to me. My mum refuses to let him. I'm on official leave as of that morning and we're heading to the hospital. CEO had told their lawyer about cancelling my health insurance and she chewed him a new a-hole, telling him it was illegal. They immediately reinstated my insurance. In the 2 weeks I was out, my mum had found a new lawyer for me as it was clear shenanigans were going on. I still needed them as an employer because I was in no shape to rigorously job hunt while recovering. Turns out all the BS they were doing to me is illegal. Companies aren't allowed to retaliate against employees when they report nefarious acts against them. Yeah, this is so true. People need to know their rights. I met with my now new lawyer, who said I had an excellent claim for retaliation and took me on. He said I had to continue working there while he did his thing to stay within protocol, while he filed the EEOC claim. Now it's time for me to return to work. The The company had relocated planned during my absence, and B-Boss refused to tell me where, so I couldn't come back to work. Company lawyer told them they had to tell me. So B-Boss gives me wrong directions, making me late on day one. I walk in the new office and it looks like any other place except for one thing. There is a wide open area directly in front of the CEO's glass office with a single desk in the middle of it. Welcome to my new desk. Also, I wasn't allowed to do sales anymore. In fact, I wasn't allowed to do anything at all, period. They had hired a bunch of new people to the company and they treated me like a pariah. Turns out B-Boss had gone to them telling a pack of lies, and if they know what's good for them, they'll stay away. Since I had nothing to do but couldn't just sit there looking like a dope, I worked on documenting everything being done to me per my lawyer's advice. I was meticulous in my note-taking. B-Boss began writing me up. Stupid stuff like not answering my phone on the first ring and for asking questions during company-wide meetings, asking to see my personnel file, which employees are legally entitled to do, although not entitled to photocopy any of it. Each time she wrote me up, I had to sign the write-up. There was a space for me to reply to it, so I consistently wrote, "I do not agree with this assessment." It infuriated her so much, she wrote me up again for writing the statement that I didn't agree with it. There were several instances where she called me into her office and literally began screaming at me loudly and enthusiastically. I wouldn't engage though. My standard answer to everything would be, okay. Was okay, which made her apoplectic. At one point, she's inches from my face screaming. Her face beat red and I just sat there with a dreamy expression whilst envisioning her blowing a vein in her head stroking out. I infuriated her with my equanimity. Still and all, I was in it to win it at this point. It didn't matter what new humiliation they dished out. I took it all with a bland face, then went to my desk and documented it in my notebook. She loathed my notebook, sure that I was doing exactly what I was doing, documenting. Because it was my personal property though, she couldn't take it from me. I had to carry all my belongings with me everywhere, company-wide meetings, the bathroom, lunch, because I caught her one time going through my desk drawer in my effing purse. Although it gave me great joy to write a note reading F you, which I left in my backpack and jerry-rigging it so I could tell if she went into it, which she did. I withstood it all with a brave face, only breaking down once I left for the day. My attorney took a lot of sobbing phone calls during this period. Finally, the day comes that my attorney has what he needs and I can resign. Better still, he advises I don't have to give a 2 weeks notice. I come back from lunch and type up my letter with one sentence, I resign immediately. I take it into the HR guy, who also took part in their evil machinations, and hand it to him. His mouth forms an O shape, and he half stands up from his chair as he reads it. He looks up and I give him a smile and say bye bye just as sweet as pie, and walked out the door and drove home feeling mighty fine. 1 month later, my lawyer and I are at the EEOC office along with the CEO, B-Boss and their lawyer, so the EEOC can review my claim. In my state, you can't just bring a lawsuit against a company for things like harassment and retaliation. Claims must first be evaluated by the EEOC, and then if they determine you have enough grounds to file a lawsuit, they issue a right to sue document. My lawyer presented my case logically and forthright, detailing all of the evidence. It took him 40 minutes to go through it all. Then they presented their side with allegations of my poor employment along with their evidence, which were all copious write-ups B-Boss had written. EEOC asks about the timeline of the write-ups, inquiring if they happened before or after my claim occurred. B-Boss, wearing a smug, self-satisfied smile, states they were all prior to my claim, as notes by the date on each document. EEOC lady looks at my lawyer looks at me. I look at B-Boss, then serenely pull out my photocopies of the documents. Whilst handing them to the EEOC lady, B-Boss barks, she's not supposed to have those, they're company property. I show EEOC lady that the dates have clearly been altered by B-Boss. She had made copies with the dates blanked out, then backdated them. You see, whenever she wrote me up, I had to take the document personally to the CEO to put in my personnel file. Along the way though, I stopped at the copier and took copies. She never knew I was doing this. You could have heard a pin drop. EEOC lady reviews the copies, then slowly sets them on the table. She didn't say a thing for a long time, then she spoke. I can remember her words exactly to this day. I've seen a lot of ill treatment and illegal undertakings by both employees and employers, including forged or altered documents. But I've never seen someone so incredibly stupid to present documents this easily disproved. Not only are employees entitled to receive and keep a copy of formal write-ups, but reading these ridiculous allegations, it's obvious you are trying to manufacture your case. She went on to say I had a clear case for a lawsuit, and moreover, I would win it. She recommended their side go in another room and determine a settlement amount to pay me immediately or risk the lawsuit. They went to a nearby office and I could hear the lawyer dressing them down. Words I heard included lied to me, lied to EEOC, presenting false documents, broke so many laws, figure out a number big enough to pay her so this doesn't go to court because you will lose. They came back with a $50,000 offer which we accepted. My lawyer and I left, then did a football touchdown dance in the parking lot. Looking up at the EEOC window, I could see B-Boss in the window looking miserable and crying. She had just been fired. That was my year 1 revenge. I'm not a hateful person, I get mad and get over it, but for B-Boss, I nurtured hatred and vowed to one day get revenge. So I kept tabs on her, and discovered she opened a finance marketing company after she was fired. Then I waited a year before exacting my petty delight. For the past 18 years, I've executed a wonderful soul-refreshing project. Each year, I go to her website and write down all the work email addresses and phone numbers for all the employees. Then I subscribe them all to get more information from places like online schools, online insurance companies, all those BS aggressive organizations that keep your contact information longer than a gypsy effing curse while trying to sell you stuff. The last few years I've subscribed them to an email bomb service where the service takes the address and instantly subscribes it to thousands of newsletters, requests for more information feeds and other online buyers of email addresses for marketing services. I tested it with a burner email and it wreaks havoc on your inbox with thousands of emails received within seconds, and they never effing stop. You literally have to close down the email because it can't be salvaged. Each year when I go to collect the contact information, all the emails have been changed to new ones. Last year, my cousin took a job in the same building. I enlisted her help and she made it a point to befriend a receptionist working for B-Boss. After executing my yearly plan, my cousin went to lunch with her. The receptionist was in a foul mood and explained the entire organisation was in disarray because IT had to redo all the emails again. It keeps happening over and over and nobody can figure out why. She said the owner, B-Boss, has had to get her cell phone number replaced 3 times because of all the texts and phone calls she gets whenever it happens again. Sometimes B-Boss would have her phone number on the website, which I duly subscribed to everything under the sun. The best part for me was hearing how she lost a mega client because they felt the company was in too much turmoil so often. The thought of this keeps me warm and cozy at night and I sleep so very, very well. Edit. I forgot a part of the tale. I read it a mention that if the investor pulled out, that would have been a neat twist. That jogged my memory. The investor did pull out. Once I left the company, they couldn't duplicate the same scale of sales revenue I had been generating and the investor got skittish. The company did go on to success, sans B-Boss and CEO, but it took them much longer due to this fiasco. This was 20 years ago, so $50,000 was really big. Wow, that's a lot of money. That's really good. Awesome. Good job, OP. This next post is by MNWNM. Hell hath no fury like me scorned. The beginning. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary, my dad met his third wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and my dad abandoned us in our basement apartment to live on a shanty houseboat that didn't run to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mum. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me my dad's brain tumour had returned, it hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. That the only people he could bear to be around was her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. The middle. There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I were no contact, but I heard from family that he'd bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandma passed, Shorty and shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and everything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it. I have a really great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. 2 years ago, October 19, I get a call from my dad's brother, Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state, great, and I needed to go see him because he needed my help. WTF? Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she died in 2017. She suffered, and I was happy to hear it, but sad it wasn't a cancer. Shorty became his power of attorney, POA, when she died, and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 children and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mum died. But now he was MIA, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I'd been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of effing awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door for the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard, 2 were full of trash, cabs and beds and back seats just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags, I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicapped modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to hell. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded. Boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage. Broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bed-bound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty's A, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it. Durable, financial and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this S out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew. He put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA, and now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know you know them. It's like playing 7 degrees of everybody all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished. and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a PO box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his accounts and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty wife had died, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch, 2 hours from my house, the next day to pick the records up. I sat in the lobby all afternoon going through the account. I cornered a service rep and got the crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and social security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months, and every time he did it, as the POA, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open, and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told him I was the POA for my dad, was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no and I wanted them towed. He told me to call the tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did and that he's an a-hole. I responded, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him OP is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy bee when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad. Just so effing cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades, and here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's S up. Taking time away from my family, and for what? I had a coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now or double down, and the thing is, I'm tenacious. To a goddamn fault. I had to be to survive, and this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income probably disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear, second hand from me, that he's broken alone made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left, so I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night I googled restraining orders, and it was surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown, went to the clerk's office and told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veteran groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a effing barrel. He asked about my dad's stint in the Marines, and about the DoD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one, where Shorty would be able to argue against it. Then I went home and googled biohazard companies and elder abuse statutes in my state. I hired a biohazard company to shovel all S out of the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting S. I made pictures and spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because F it, now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8 to 10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog from every angle. Before court, I went to a nearby police station and told them I wanted to report an elder abuse crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me it was a domestic matter and that since Shorty had been POA, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a POA. Thanks, Google. I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the haunted house, and a dead dog. A copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was just over $130,000 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used. I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number and I sat down. He came back about 30 minutes later and apologized, said I had a case and gave me a case number. Then I headed over to the courthouse. There were other people there and I had to wait my turn, and as I was waiting, this stupid MF schlepped his sloppy A into the courtroom by himself and obviously literally non-metaphorically dirty. His shoes were untied and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn and we stood up. The same judge asked me some questions, asked him some questions, and asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I'd gone to police. Well, yes sir, I have. Do you have a case number? As a matter of fact, the order was granted, permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Someone told me that the courthouse would have to have a copy of my dad's DD-214 discharge papers, so while I was there, I got a copy of those because why not? I also used my POA to take Shanty wife off the deed to the house. That way if my dad died and it went into probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and Shanty wife's death certificate. Technically, stepchildren can't request that info, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she lost her virginity to my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral, so I got all the forms I wanted. Shanty wife left my dad $50,000 in life insurance. About $35,000 of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mum's. So I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. That's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there. And I made sure there was effing nothing there. My dad died thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date. And Shanty wife was the beneficiary. My POA didn't allow me to charge beneficiaries, but it did allow me to assign them, and since Shanty wife was dead, there technically was no beneficiary. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as beneficiaries. Irrevocable too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all this. The only thing he really ever knew about was the restraining order in his dead dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty wife and he wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to effing happen. I googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam era veteran, so I arranged for that instead. All the cherries on top, my dad died in June this year and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website and that was only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn is purple, the colour he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because of course she is, that's how it effing works here. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on felony elder abuse charges. He's facing 10 years in FPMITA prison. She told me not to expect the trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him, and after all that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids. He lost his dad. I'm spending his mum's cancer money. He lost his free house and trucks. He has no credit and will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like an effing baby. These posts always mind blow me. Anyway, I think that's going to be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/NuclearRevenge. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comment section below. And also hit that subscribe button because I post new Reddit content every single day. My name is Trey, this was Reload Reacts, and I will see you in the next video.